Welcome, Night Wanderer. When do we consider something real, alive? There are those who cultivate farms on devices that fit in their hands. They hatch dragon eggs, wage wars, and play 1,000 different versions of Tetris. They craft simulated lives filled with love, betrayal, marriage, babies, and even death. When we sell ourselves to devices, do we ever wonder if the price is more eternal than the dollars we spent to acquire them? I, Silas Reynolds, will be your companion this evening. Come, wander with me. Malls were dying before the reciprocal arena arrived at Southridge. Kids abandoned the squeaky tiles they once trod. They no longer stumbled upon sticky spots that clung to their shoes as they tried to awkwardly walk them off. They didn't pass beneath fluorescent-lit food courts filled with smoothies, soft pretzels, mediocre pizza, and cheap takeout that occasionally made you either really thirsty or fairly sick. The arena was installed by GOTF, Games of the Future. The mastermind and owner of the company, Alex Mason, was a genius billionaire with the prestige of Bruce Wayne, but missing the caring vigilante heart. He'd recently survived an assault from a disgruntled employee that tried to cut open his throat. But the story details were scarce, despite intense curiosity and speculation on the subject. It hadn't stopped him from adding reciprocal arenas to over 300 malls within the last 6 months. The screen wasn't an IMAX, as the designers originally wanted, but it was larger than an average theater screen, at 50 by 75 feet. A domed amphitheater replaced the location of a dying department store chain at the far right end of the mall. The theater consisted of benches rather than padded chairs. Like most money-making machines, they wanted people comfortable, but not comfortable enough to plant for long periods of time. Churning through patrons was always the goal. On each side of the screen were the headset rooms. Depending on the arena or experience chosen by the players, the rooms were fairly straightforward. Long, dark wires dangled from the ceiling, ending in smooth black helmets. The headsets were lightweight with clear face shields. They fully immersed players into the arena while providing sound and visuals in 360-degree clarity. On the wall of each headset room was an array of items that could be linked to a helmet for use in the games. The arena produced a variety of scenarios, updating every so often to add new grounds and features. The theater on the other side was for the spectacles to be viewed by the public, making the participants minor stars. The most high-demand sessions ranged between fighting and sports games. One even featured broomsticks, an incredibly popular arena based on the Harry Potter series. Lars loved the reciprocal arena. He'd never played a single game on it. He'd never even put one of the headsets on. He hadn't even watched a full competition played through till the end. Lars loved the arena because it breathed life back into the mall. He was a janitor at Southridge and felt eternally grateful to the device for saving his job. He loved watching the excited kids packing the parking lots and food courts as they waited between arena sessions. The traffic put more kids in the shops. They were talking face-to-face excitedly, rather than lost between endless scrolling and online retail therapy. The mall was divided between 4 night janitors. Lars always got the arena. He was the most careful and precise cleaner of the 4, and it felt like the amphitheater belonged to him. He nodded and smiled as a final group of teenagers made their way out after a lengthy battle between aliens and pirates. He noticed a woman near him watching the headset doors while struggling to keep a hand on an overly excited toddler. Lars smiled at her. "Waiting on a player?" he asked kindly. The woman nodded and mentioned something about a big brother dragging his feet to stay after and talking with his friends. "That's hard. These games are too fun. You can't blame him." She smiled in a pained way as she was forced to scoop the wriggling toddler from the ground and wrestle him onto her hip. "I think these things are great. Seeing all this come back to life has been a really neat experience for us old-timers. I never thought I'd feel this much gratitude towards an electronic. No, ma'am. I loved the mall when I was a kid. My dad, he was a suit salesman here. back when they had those and knew what they were doing. He was really good at it. He broke off as he realized his eyes were tearing up. Damn it. What was it about getting old and talking about the past? Hey, he stepped towards the headset rooms. I'll go get your boy, how's about? I gotta get cleaning anyway. You have a nice night. She said thank you as her toddler started to cry to be put down. Lars wiped his eyes once his back was turned. Teenagers streamed past him. Possibly one of them was the boy she was waiting on. When he came to the left headset room, it was empty. He flicked on the bright ceiling lights to make sure. Looking back at the benches, he saw the mother still waiting. He gave her a quick nod and headed to the other player room on the right. The lights were already on, and a scrawny dark-haired kid was standing next to his recently removed helmet. He was staring hard into a corner of the room. Hey, buddy! The boy jumped as Lars called out. Your mom's waiting for you out here. The boy turned, his glasses glinting off the lights. His face looked frightened. You aren't in trouble, son, Lars said gently. I think your little brother is ready to go. The boy blinked back in response. Hey! Lars approached him genially. You okay?
There was something in the room.
The boy pointed to the corner, his voice sounding ghostly and haunted. Lars raised his eyebrows. He too looked at the corner. The highlights of the room left little in darkness. It was completely empty. Lars took in the boy's glasses. What was it? He asked politely. The boy shook his head, looked back at the corner.
I don't know.
Did you see it before the lights came back on? Lars prodded. After the game? The boy nodded. Probably just a trick in the dark. That happens to me too sometimes. You better get back to your mom before she comes down to get you. She seems pretty tired. The boy took one more glance at the janitor, and then darted from the room. Lars swept the staggered seats with knotted hands. He hummed Route 66 as he used a special solution to dissolve a stubborn piece of sickly pink bubblegum stuck to one of the benches. Lars didn't mind being a janitor. He always loved malls. Malls were hip, happening. They were where the action is. Even if he couldn't quite grasp the new language of riz, cooked, or tough, those words had completely different meanings for Lars, or none at all. He felt extremely content with the happiness of the mall's patrons. The reciprocal arena went into peace mode each night after business closed. Once, towards the beginning of his shift and before peace mode went active, Lars had spotted a promotional interview with Alex Mason being replayed over the arena lobby TVs. Arenas were composed of an assembly of GPUs, powerful processing computers, and a swath of other technical mumbo-jumbo Lars couldn't comprehend, beyond superficial references to the few terms he could remember. The arena didn't just produce the vibrant immersions its players enjoyed. It also captured every movement, sound, and behavioral nuance of every player present throughout the sessions. Massive amounts of data were collected every day to be processed by the network of arenas across the country during peace mode. GOTF's proprietary AI models were further trained on this data to improve existing games and produce new ones. The scenes of peace mode were never too complex. An abandoned beach, a quiet forest, or deserted meadow with a shimmering mountain in the distance. Currently the screen revealed tall redwoods and springy moss and grass. Lars didn't need headphones. He could hear the sounds of the forest in his mind, with the clear, picture-perfect screen displayed hugely before him. He was sweeping a small pile of hard pretzel salt when something from the corner of his eyes made him jump. He turned to face the screen. It was still displaying the forest scene, moving carefully through high trees. He rubbed his tired eyelids. Maybe he'd spent enough time cleaning tonight. The salt was the last of the spills, and he'd already wiped down the headset room's equipment with disinfectant wipes. He packed away his tools, carefully avoiding the massive screen. It was only when a second flash of color sped past the corner of his eye that he looked sharply back. Nothing. The scene had gone from woods to a quiet sandy beach with a soft sunset. He swallowed. He watched rolling waves, but no longer heard the comforting sound of them in his head. The silence of the amphitheater pressed on his ears instead, like a shrinking set of earmuffs. He looked into the darker parts of the room, the ones less brightened by overhead lights, but he didn't see anything. Maybe the boy's uneasiness and claim about something from the corner was spooking him, making him see shadows that weren't there. Telling himself he needed a good long rest that evening, he clicked out the lights, locked up, and went home. The following day, Lars arrived at the mall around 7 p.m. He was happy to have reserved parking, as the place was bursting at the seams for a Tuesday. He smiled, knowing there was a large group playing in the arena that evening. He'd hoped he'd get a chance to go watch, but probably wouldn't have time with the bathrooms. If it went late, though, he could catch a peek before the mall closed. He cleaned the restrooms on his end of the mall quickly, but efficiently. He waved at Gerald, an honorary janitor from the west side of the mall. Then he hustled to the reciprocal arena to catch the end of whatever game was being played. The amphitheater was full and noisy as he approached. He grimaced as he recognized the theme music for Volleyball Death. It wasn't his favorite game, but it was an oddly popular pick. The goal was in the name. Players competed in a volleyball tournament to the death. They could spike the ball hard enough to take another player's head off. Teammates regenerated between plays, but the game didn't end until only one person was left standing. Lars found the game too bloody and violent for his taste. He liked Pirates vs. Aliens because the graphics were lifelike, and the dynamic between spaceships and massive pirate boats was fun to watch and less gory. He enjoyed the adventure games where teens, and a fair few adults, worked together on quests. He liked the little kid games where they tried to cook together or build things. Or he enjoyed clean sports and simple racing. He sighed as he made his way down one of the back staircases towards the headset room, while convincing himself not to scowl at a parent who'd brought what looked like a 9-year-old to watch the session. There were age restrictions for specific games, but parents sometimes lied. If you had a tall tween, you could skirt past the rules. No one was checking birth certificates. Telling himself the playtime would wrap soon anyway, he waited patiently at the bottom of the stairs. He could start the night wiping down the headsets and equipment. Then he could clean the theater in peace mode. It sounded like a nice evening. A scream grew beneath the yells and shouts from the crowd. A scream that didn't quite match the joyful cheers or disappointed groans from the crowd. Lars looked at the people on the benches as voices slowly quieted over higher and higher piercing shrieks. He ran to the right side headset room. He didn't quite make it to the door before it burst open. 2 teenage boys and a girl were half carrying another in hysterics. She was frantically flailing like a fish caught in a net, and her screams rent the air like explosions. Lars didn't know what to do as the girl's parents and friends converged on her. But amidst the bodies, he saw a large blot of crimson blooming along the sleeve of her blue sweatshirt. "She's bleeding!" one of the boys yelled in panic. "There's something in there!" The girl's scream turned to actual words. She yelled and pointed frantically at the headset room. "There's something in there!" The girl continued to cry as her parents tried to calm her, tried to wrap her bleeding arm. Lars quickly took out his cell phone and dialed 911. Lars stood in his kitchen hours later, unnerved by the incident. He was trying to compile himself a simple sandwich for dinner, but lost the method somewhere between the salami and red wine vinegar. There's something in there. The girl's cut arm wasn't life-threatening. EMTs arrived quickly, calming the crowd and dispersing them from the amphitheater. Lars was allowed to stay, but at a distance from the scene. His boss showed up along with some other important suits who wanted to make sure they weren't about to be sued. There's something in there. Though the girl's arm was fine, her mental state wasn't. She'd been given something to calm her nerves by the EMTs, but she'd continued to fight, She wanted away from the arena. Every inch of the reciprocal arena was checked and gone over. Nothing was discovered. They couldn't distinguish exactly what had cut the girl's arm. The line running from her upper shoulder to her elbow was needle thin. It had gone deep enough to draw blood, but wasn't wide enough to cause more damage. Because no one was detained on the property during the attack, police would have to look up the teammates and see if one of them had harmed the girl during the session. Lars didn't understand how any of that could be. If a kid removed their helmet during play, everything paused. The headsets were spaced specifically to avoid players running into or hitting one another, almost like leashes attached to their heads. They kept players tethered to their own circular spots. If one of the kids meant her harm, they would have had to pretend to be part of their team, and then not wear a headset for the entirety of the session, just to give the girl a cut and a bad scare? After 3 hours, Lars was cleared to do his cleaning. He'd done a poor job, not his usual standard, but he would make up for it on his next shift. He too wanted away from the arena. There's something in there. He couldn't help thinking of the little boy he'd seen the other day, the one who looked so intently at the corner of the headset room, swearing he'd seen something that frightened him. But it was just games. There wasn't anything in the side rooms. He finished making his sandwich and sat down to watch some news. The mall incident wasn't reported, but he hadn't thought it would be. The girl was fine, just shaken. That's me as well, he said to himself. I'm fine, just shaken, like 007's favorite drink. As he watched the screen, he was reminded of an old story one of his favorite teachers read to his class in 5th grade. Her name was Mrs. Madden, and she earned it. She was an odd duck, but a fun one. She always read to the class at the end of the day, and she'd had a knack for picking scary stories. Ray Bradbury was a favorite of hers. The Veldt was a dystopian tale from his youth. It was written in 1950 and read to him in 1971. The idea of a robotic house taking care of a family's every need was an incredible thought. It could only be imagined, not created. It was along the same lines as Tony Stark's Iron Man suit, or the light swords of Star Wars. It never felt real to Lars, though, just hopeful. The Veldt, however, was not a pretty story about how great life would be to have a house doing all the work for you. On the contrary, the children grew warped from the ersatz parent, and the ending was dark and disturbing. What made him think of that story? The arena wasn't hurting kids. That was a mad idea. That was a, I'm getting too old for this idea. He loved the arena. Somebody hurt that girl, but it wasn't the reciprocal arena. Lars arrived at work the next evening to find no slump in the players stampeding for the amphitheater. The mall was still packed with patrons despite yesterday's incident. He took extra care in the bathrooms that evening. He didn't want to watch the last session. Still, he arrived 10 minutes before closing, and the game was running down the clock to the cutoff. He breathed a sigh of relief to see it was an adventure party. The group, in varying mythical-bodied forms on the screen, were conversing with enchanted unicorns about a maze. They were making hand motions to their heads and chests, then pointing onto the pathways. These types of games could be suspended and saved for future experiences. It cost patrons more for their game to be held, especially the longer they took between excursions, but people paid it. Lars looked into the crowd. This adventure game didn't draw audiences the way competitive ones did. There were a few loyal friends, casually watching between glances at their phones. A few members of the audience were only watching for a place to sit. The theater was only ticketed on high-profile games or competitions. Most of the time the seats were free, especially with the cost of the arena being so steep. Lars noticed a thin man near the front of the screen. He noticed him because he looked like an old detective, sprung from a black and white movie set. He wore a long collared coat he'd pulled up around his face, sunglasses, and a brimmed hat. Lars couldn't understand why he was dressed that way indoors. A clanking sound brought Lars's head around. but it was only a child dropping a heavy wooden sword onto the bench in front of him and his exhausted-looking father. When Lars looked back for the strange man in the odd coat, he was gone. 15 minutes later found the theater empty. Lars opened the left headset room and wiped down the equipment. He decided to power mop the floor, as it was Wednesday, and last he'd done that was Friday. The mop was loud, but he never used headphones. He liked to sing, and he felt safe enough to sing when there were other noises to distract him from the sounds coming from himself. The mop whirled over smooth black floor as he maneuvered between the headsets. It gave the room a nice lavender smell. He'd picked the solution, as lemon scents always made him feel sick. Gerald used lemon, and everything always stayed smelling of piss and sweat with a hint of lemon. Lavender was nice and gentle, and it took away the tang of perspiration and body odor. He hummed the last of Somewhere Beyond the Sea before he felt a prickle on his neck. He pushed the button to kill the mop. As the sound died away, he thought he heard something just beyond the headset room. He waited, strained his ears. He didn't like the new vibes he was getting from the arena in the last 2 days, but he was determined to move past them. Silence, aside from the quiet humming of the computers of the reciprocal arena. He pushed the mop back on and finished the left headset room. He switched out the light and locked the door with his jangling set of keys. The arena glowed in peace mode. It showed a meadow hill covered in flowers. A mountain lay in the distance. Lars grabbed his cart full of cleaning tools and strolled it as though he were taking his own stroll through the meadow. He thought of the veldt again, and promptly hated himself for thinking about it. In the story, there was a screen in the children's nursery, a screen a bit like the reciprocal arena. It was meant to be a place where the children could pick out scenes to play in while in the nursery, but as the children grew resentful, the scenes changed from frolicking meadows and pretty little play places. It's not like the reciprocal, though, Lars thought to himself. The screen doesn't display images from children's psyches. It's a toy, not a babysitter or a purchased parent. The screen shifted, and Lars froze. One of the levels from Volleyball Death appeared. Lars backed up without meaning to. The scene didn't contain players, but the yellow beach sand was spattered in blood. It was gone before he fully registered it. He returned to the meadow. His heart beat in a way that frightened him. He wondered if the glitch was worth reporting. He knew the game where the scene came from, but it had been highly unnerving to see all the blood and gore, even without the bodies of players. Somehow, that made it worse. A shadow fell across the screen, and Lars turned. Someone was standing at the entrance to the amphitheater. The words, "We're closed," didn't quite make it into Lars's mouth. It was the trenchcoat man. "Hey!" Lars started, but the figure darted away. Lars didn't think he could outrun him, so he pulled a radio from his cart, one he rarely used to communicate with the other janitors and night patrol. "Hey! I got a patron that didn't leave the mall." Gerald responded about the code for that situation, which Lars ignored. One of the night patrol officers, a younger kid named Jake, responded. He asked for the location. Lars told him near the amphitheater. He told Jake the intruder didn't appear to have a weapon, and Jake responded, "I hope not. We're not exactly given guns." "You're not?" "Nope. We have tasers and a knife. The policemen who come around once an hour have guns. We're rent-a-cops." Lars chuckled. He felt a little better having talked to Jake. The trenchcoat man hadn't looked very big, and he didn't show any signs of aggression. Maybe he was a harmless nut. 10 minutes later, Jake reported the area was empty, but that he would patrol so Lars could finish his work. Lars scrubbed headsets quickly, knowing he needed to do a better job than the previous night. As much as he tried to ignore it, he could see everything on repeat. The boy pointing into the corner, the girl screaming and bleeding from her arm, the bloody beach, and the trench-coated stranger. His index finger locked painfully as he tried to carefully wipe the inside of a helmet. He cursed and rubbed the sore knuckle. He didn't normally use a lot of profanity, but under the pressure of the situation, the words were spilling from his mouth like spittle from a teething infant. He didn't want to run them up, but he'd already done the left side. He cursed again as he fetched it from his cart. He didn't sing as he hastily ran the wet vacuum brush into the corners. He knew he was only imagining it, but he couldn't stop checking the doorway. He was afraid the lights would go out, and the door would slam. He told himself over and over that wouldn't happen, and even if it did, he had the keys to get out. He received a second shock to see someone in the doorway, but it was only Jake. He told Lars he didn't think whoever he'd seen had stuck around. He and another guard thoroughly checked, and figured the intruder snuck out of one of the back doors, or maybe one of the stock rooms. One of the stores had a night crew delivering boxes from a truck at the moment. Lars didn't argue, but found holes in the theory all the same. The night crews would have spotted someone on the dock. They didn't leave anything unattended. All the back doors and emergency exits sounded alarms without keys to silence them. The following evening, Lars was relieved to reach his weekend. He'd get 2 days off after this shift, and though he usually got annoyed by the janitor who worked the arena while he was gone, he knew he needed the break. Once a pack of 14 to 16-year-olds stopped blowing one another up between space and pirate ships, Lars went to work. He avoided interacting with the guests, hoping he wasn't coming off rude. He simply needed time away from the reciprocal, the mall, everything his job entailed. He loathed hosting feelings that itched of retirement, but he told himself it was temporary. He'd merely had a bad week. After doing a fine job in the left headset room, where one of the kids sweat so profusely over the faceplate he'd had to use a magic eraser to clean it up, he clicked out the lights with satisfaction. He wheeled his cart back to the front of the screen and froze. Someone was sitting in the arena. Lars felt a tightness in his chest that he didn't like at all. His heart squeezed blood through veins that turned into the kind of straws children used for juice pouches. The person wasn't moving, just staring at the screen on peace mode. "Sir?" Lars started with a squeak in his voice. "Sir, the reciprocal is closed." The man didn't move. He didn't even tilt his head in Lars's direction. "Sir." Lars moved cautiously closer, puzzling over the lack of movement from the figure. It sat so still and straight it was a mannequin. "What the The words died across his tongue. The mannequin's face was a smooth white surface, with only the slimmest outlines of features. The screen image reflected off it. He was masculine. Lars thought he recognized him from a sports shoe store. His face looked emptily at the arena screen, his body perfectly folded to fit on the bench. Lars didn't know they could bend that way. He thought this particular doll was meant for running poses. He turned to look at the scene playing out in peace mode. It was another secluded beach, this one with a rocky shore like you'd find in the Pacific Northwest. He went to his cart and picked up his radio. "Guys!" His voice still sounded higher than normal. "I'm not trying to be a wet blanket or anything. I'm usually down for a good practical joke. Who put a mannequin in the amphitheater?"
What?
Jake sounded angry. "There's a mannequin down here. He dropped the radio. It bounced on the cord that kept it tied to the cart. Lars had turned back to the mannequin, away from the screen, only to find it had moved. It wasn't a dramatic movement. The head was no longer pointed directly at the monitor. Now it looked at the floor. His heart tightened further, but he tried to breathe normally. When the mannequin raised its head to peer at him, Lars almost fainted. He could hear static, someone talking over the radio, but the words didn't make sense in his current state. The doll tilted its head at him slowly. Lars wasn't sure how long they stood there like that. He eventually picked up his radio and said, "Never mind, I got it." He wasn't sure what made him say it, but the mannequin didn't do anything. Lars wondered if he was even real. It was possible the stress of the week had come down too hard on him, and the mannequin was just a crack from the pressure. They stared at one another until the mannequin pointed to the screen, then to his hollow chest. The mannequin tapped his chest, placed a hand flat over his plastic left pectoral. Lars looked at the screen. It changed to a forest. He moved a little closer to the doll as it continued to point at the screen, then touch his chest. In the dim light, Lars hadn't realized the mannequin was in the trench coat he'd seen on the stranger from the previous night. "What is this?" Lars asked quietly. The mannequin continued the motion, but added an addition of touching his forehead. "The reciprocal." Lars pointed at the screen as well. "You came from the reciprocal." The mannequin paused with his hand resting on his head. He nodded slowly, then shook his head just as slowly. "Something came from the reciprocal," Lars amended. The mannequin nodded. He made plaintive motions, almost as though he were pleading. "You don't understand?" He shook his head. Lars looked back at the screen. He thought about the humming of computers. He thought about the endless consciousness of children plugging their minds into games repeatedly. He thought about the devices within the machine to create and manipulate environments on a screen. He knew AI was adapted into the games. He'd never understood all the technology behind the reciprocal, but some part of it landed outside the machine, onto this empty body. It was impossible, but here it was. The mannequin continued its motions in an almost manic way. Had it come to the reciprocal seeking understanding? "It's okay," Lars said quietly. It felt like talking to a child. "It's all right. We'll figure this out." A deafening scream erupted outside the amphitheater. The mannequin shrank back, covering his face with smooth, glossy hands. Lars looked around. If this mannequin had become animated by the reciprocal, what else could be? Mannequins looked different with each store. There were dress shops filled with large, busted forms and sexy evening gowns. They didn't have heads. They ended at the neck. Some mannequins didn't have arms, though most had legs. There was an oddity shop that housed 3 old mannequins from dead department chains. They had glass eyes and old-fashioned style hair and makeup. There was a hairy Bigfoot statue near the south side where kids took pictures. Lars got up slowly and went to his cart. He didn't have much in the way of weapons. He could hear Jake laughing about being a rent-a-cop, and realized the guards were pretty much defenseless. Though the mannequin sitting in front of the reciprocal didn't appear hostile, screaming wasn't a good sign. He picked up his radio. "Is everyone okay out there?" he asked hopefully. "I thought I heard a shout." No one replied. "Jake? Gerald?" Nothing. He wondered if he could tune the walkie to a cop outside the mall, then realized he had no idea how to accomplish that. He didn't bother picking up a can of pepper spray he kept in a box of extra tools. That seemed pointless. Instead, he gripped one of his brooms, twisted off the brush, and held it like a spear. The mannequin watched him with his blank face. He'd lowered his hands. "I'll be right back." The mannequin did the motions again, and Lars realized why it was striking a chord of familiarity with him. The adventure group he'd seen on Wednesday had been making similar motions within the game, trying to gain entrance to the maze. Feeling as though he'd slipped right into one of the stories from Mrs. Madden's 5th grade class, Lars made his way out of the amphitheater. Darkness painted the high skylights of the mall. The lights were turned down at closing, dimly glowing for the night janitors, unless they used their keys to turn them back up. Most of the stores had gates they pulled down and locked each night to protect each respective space. They looked like cages in the dark. Lars hesitated between pursuing the scream and leaving to get help. He had keys to let himself out. Maybe an officer would be in the parking lot. He didn't know what kind of help he needed, but any aid would feel better than standing in a darkened, empty mall with half a broom. Something clattered from one of the stores. Lars jumped and turned towards the noise. In a large bookstore that had recently returned to the mall, a figure fumbled against the chained gate. Lars swallowed as he watched a child-sized figure push its hands through the square parts of the links. The metal rattled as the thing struggled. A second figure soon joined the first, and Lars took a step back. He remembered the statue of children playing Ring Around the Rosie in the children's section of the bookstore. He felt a sinking in his bowels as he watched more figures collecting at the gate. Several hands now strained against the chain. Some pushed through while others gripped the material and shook it. They couldn't speak or make sound, but the clanking chains were enough. Lars backed away slowly. He needed to leave, to get help. He turned away from the reaching hands and tried to head for the doors when he heard a shattering of glass. An alarm sounded, but not one for the doors. It was a store alarm. Something had broken through one of the display windows, and it was coming from the direction he needed to go to reach the exit doors. With a loud electrical snap, the power cut out, and the lights were extinguished. It silenced the alarm, but not the rush of blood in Lars's ears from his pounding heart rate. He felt trapped. The only light left came from small white emergency lights that ran on batteries, and they were far and few in between. He could go to the south exit. Maybe that was clear. He didn't want to see whatever smashed its way out of a display window. He also couldn't help thinking. If the mannequin at the reciprocal was calm and non-aggressive because it adapted information from an adventure game, what other games were articulating inanimate objects? Help! Somebody help me! The scream acted like an instinctual pull, and it was joined by more. Men were screaming, pleading. Lars ran towards the center of the mall, feeling all 64 years of his age as he did so. He could feel his side growing sore as he tried to move towards the cries for help. They were growing in desperation and frequency. Loud snaps intensified the sounds, but some of the cries died with the noise. The scene he happened upon brought him up short. 3 mannequins, the 3 from the oddity shop by the looks of their full petite coat dresses, were pummeling Gerald and 2 other night guards to a pulp with a display volleyball from the sports store. The ball was concrete. Even though he'd seen volleyball death 100 times on a screen, it took him a moment to connect which game the dolls were emulating. Blood smeared the floor in burgundy lines that looked almost black in the half-dark. Both guards were already decapitated. Gerald's legs were broken and smashed as the 3 vintage dolls bashed his head in with a sculpted concrete volleyball. Shaking with fear, Lars again tried to back away slowly. He said 1,000 prayers in half a second as he edged away. Each placement of his step felt like it must be precisely placed. He gripped his broom handle so tightly, he felt pain run through his arthritic wrists. One of the mannequins, with hair clearly black even in the dim light, twitched her head as though in irritation at the mess she and her comrades were making. Lars couldn't make out all the details on their faces, but he knew them. He'd gone to the oddity shop plenty of times to purchase a unique gift now and then. Even before they'd turned into whatever they were now, the dark-haired one always made him uneasy to look at. Her painted red lips were a little too shiny, and her smile a little too wide compared with the other 2. Watching them examine the destroyed bodies reminded Lars of a cat observing its prey. Their emotionless white faces glowed softly in the darkness, the plain indifference of their examinations equating to incomprehensible callousness in Lars's mind. His shoe squeaked on the slippery floor. 3 heads turned in his direction. He didn't wait to see what they would do. He turned and ran. He fell hard as music burst through overhead speakers. It was loud, one of the alternative bands from the 90s era that usually played in the store where kids' favorite color was anything edgy.
Shit.
He heard Jake over the speaker.
Damn it. How do I turn this off? If anyone is alive, head to the
It cut out as Lars scrambled up. He could hear the clatter of rapid plastic feet behind him, but didn't look back. Lights flashed on and off as something fought with Jake in the control room. Not a physical fight, but a fight over control of the mall's sound system. The mall lit up fully, and Lars saw things he'd missed in his flight to help Gerald and the guards. Another janitor named Mary was half pulled through a store window. The big-chested mannequins, in their glittery prom dresses, were pulling her eyeballs out. The cement volleyball flew inches from his left shoulder. Lars pivoted sideways as one of the full-bodied mannequin women flew past him to retrieve it. Lars turned in time to catch a second figure in its middle, with the broomstick handle. It caught the thing off guard, but its hands grasped the weapon and pulled it away with them as they fell. Lars couldn't retrieve it. Adrenaline kept him moving, even as the pain in his chest grew. He'd never had a heart attack before. He wondered if this was the beginning of his first, as he tried hard to reach the reciprocal. Glass shattered, and chain gates rattled as he went. Instrumental mall music replaced the screaming singers of the previous song, giving off a simple mindless tune to keep people relaxed and spending. A limp in his right leg grew as the muscles spasmed. He chanced to glance behind him, just as the lights and music died completely. In the distance, he heard Jake screaming. Cursing himself for not grabbing the heavy flashlight from his cart, Lars dived into a soft playpad area for kids. It was close to the amphitheater, but he couldn't quite make it all the way without a rest. He got on his knees and scrambled into a soft plastic log. He knew the space fairly well, though Mary usually scrubbed the toys down at the end of the day. It was one of the newer designs, all soft edges and padded plastic coating over a woodland scene. There was a slide in a hollowed-out tree, molded raccoons children could pretend to ride, and the log tunnel where Lars tried to catch his breath. None of the mannequins followed. He prayed the lack of light helped them lose sight of him, then wondered how any of them could see at all. Maybe they used senses rather than sight. Trying not to breathe like a dying rhinoceros, he pulled himself cautiously to one of the peepholes cut into the toy. Lights flickered once more as he spied the pack of statue children from the bookstore. Apparently they found a way around the chained gate as they carried the dead body of another security guard. His rotund belly appeared to be leaking, and occasionally splashed the tiled floor as they moved him. Lars ducked back into the tunnel as the three from the oddity shop noticed the group and sprung upon them. They wrenched the guard away and strategically began breaking the statue children to pieces. Lars lay flat on his back as he felt his heart pound harder and harder. Would he die here? In a child's toy? Not from blunt force trauma, but his own body betraying him? Tears rolled into his earlobes and hair as he fought to regain control. If Jake went to the control room, could he have called the police? Surely that's the first thing he would have done. Maybe they were on their way. He wanted to believe Jake wasn't dead. Injured most likely, but not dead. Why did he tell anyone alive to go to the amphitheater? Lars thought he might know. The smashing sounds of cement ended. Lars held his breath as he listened to the sound of squeaky plastic limbs moving. The three girls must have been victorious over the child figures. Slowly the sounds of squeaking and bent plastic moved away, dragging something heavy with it as it went. Lars waited, both wanting to sprint and not move at the same time. He felt like 10 minutes had passed when it might have only been 2. He crawled out of the play tunnel, prepared to make a mad dash for the amphitheater. The click of plastic made him turn to look at one mannequin, who had waited for him to reappear. Her black hair stood out even in the darkness. She tilted her head, the way the mannequin at the reciprocal had. Her painted red smile and glassy eyes shimmered. The volleyball lay shattered with the remnants of stone children. She reached down and picked up a shard of the ball instead, a shard broken into a jagged dagger. Lars knew he couldn't outrun her. He wanted to, but his body felt gelatinous and limp. His knees knocked as she moved towards him. He didn't recognize the trench-coated mannequin from the reciprocal at first. The white body sprinted in front of Lars, taking the brunt of the dagger in his false shoulder. He was no longer wearing the trench coat, but a sword and shield. Lars recognized them from the board game store on the west side of the mall. He forced himself to half run and half hobble as the two human figures flung themselves at one another. His right leg dragged horribly. His chest felt cinched between fiery belts as he reached the doors to the amphitheater. He left his keys on the cart, but he could still engage the simple lock. He looked out before sealing the door, only to see his rescuer being pulled into pieces by the female mannequin. Neither puppet could scream, but a cry escaped the janitor as he watched in horror. Then he slammed the door shut. The reciprocal had gone insane. Scenes flashed. A peaceful meadow to a burning pirate ship. A glistening pond with something red seeping up from the bottom. The bloodied beaches of volleyball death. And a beautiful mountain trail pass with occasional bodies falling from the sky on the right. A loud thud hit the doors, but they held. Lars limped to the left side headset room and grabbed a play broom from the equipment wall. It didn't matter what weapon he chose. They were all made of the same lightweight steel, and the brooms had thick steel brushes. He marched in front of the screen. A bleeding volcano colored the room in a red glow. Lars grabbed his tallest stepladder, trying to reach as much of the screen as possible. He lifted the play broom and slammed it into the reciprocal. It glanced off the surface while sending numbing vibrations in his arms and chest, but a crack appeared. As the pounding on the theater doors increased, Lars hit the screen over and over again. Small pieces shattered and broke away as the images flickered between static and blurs of color. The sides of his vision grew blurry as he beat the screen, using the broom as a wedge to pry off larger and larger pieces. A hard shock in his chest sent him spiraling to the ground, but he glanced a satisfactory crack running up the screen, like the run in an old nylon as he fell. He hit the floor, but didn't lose consciousness right away. He could hear sirens in the distance. Alex Mason slid from the leather seats of his car as his door was held open. His high-collared suit shirt didn't quite cover the dark scar running the length of his tan neck. A couple more surgeries, and it wouldn't be so visible. The ambulances were cleared. Only a few squad cars remained. Yellow police tape lined the entrance to the mall. Behind it lay his latest creation. He wasn't going to talk to the small people. That wasn't his job. But he needed to appear as though he cared about the loss of life. He knew the reciprocal couldn't be responsible in any way, and was furious it had been damaged. The computers, however, remained intact. How many people died? He asked his assistant again. He couldn't hold on to facts like that. 7, sir. His assistant was furiously typing on his iPad. He didn't even look at Alex. To pay the families would make us look guilty, right? Even if it was just to get this done quickly. Leonard looked at him. He was lanky, like overpulled taffy. He looked ridiculous, but he was impeccably good at his job. He thought over Alex's proposal for about 2 seconds. I'm afraid that would look as though you were taking blame, sir. Unless we made it more of a donation spin, like a funding for their violent deaths. That could work, but they'll still want answers. Where's the janitor blaming the reciprocal? Hospital. It's not that far from here. He's older? 64. He could have killed those people. One had their face smashed by a cement block shaped like a volleyball. I'm not sure he'd have the strength. Alex huffed in annoyance as an equally annoyed mall executive came charging up the parking lot towards him. Would someone let him know he's not approaching me like that? Alex said angrily. Already taken care of it. Leonard was back on his iPad. One of Alex's security guards stopped the man, calming him before approaching Alex. After nearly having his carotid artery slashed the previous year, he wasn't letting anyone get that close again. The man looked like a chimney stack about to burst. Once he'd been given the rundown, he was escorted to Alex with the guard glued to his side. Good morning. Alex gave him a gracious, false smile. Not really, the man huffed. I have 7 dead bodies in my mall. And a heavily damaged piece of expensive equipment from what I hear. The man purpled. He knew damn well his mall had been saved by the reciprocal, like so many others. The night janitor, Lars Daniels, he said, "He's 64? That's a bit up there, isn't it? He was close to retiring?" "Not that I knew of. He claims your reciprocal brought mannequins to life? Animated the mall?" The man fumbled again, frustrated at continually being cut off. His face was the color of an eggplant. "I think he suffered a psychotic break," Alex went on quickly. No need to look further into that. That's for his psych eval. Unless your officers found animated mannequins within the mall this morning." The man shook his head, chewing on his cheek as he did so. "I will pay to have the reciprocal restored, and we're setting up funding for the families harmed in this vicious attack. Clearly someone entered the mall and hurt these people." "The security cameras were knocked out," the man glowered. "A pulse that came from within the mall computers." "Unfortunate," Alex retorted coldly. "That's a problem with your system, not mine." "Those damn computers." "Would you like them removed?" The man's face drained of color. He looked as though his feet grew roots into the tarry pavement. "I will restore the reciprocal," Alex said again firmly. "We'll help find out what happened here, and we'll help pay for the damages sustained by the mall." He ended the conversation with a curt nod, motioning for his bodyguards to take him to the reciprocal screen. He walked past the deflated mall owner, but only made it a few steps before the man turned and spoke again. "Will you restore the mannequins, Mr. Mason?" Alex turned back. "The mannequins?" "Yes, you see, 13 mannequins are currently missing from the mall." Night Wanderings is written by Al Poland, directed and produced by Silas Reynolds. Notes for this story and research were done reading Ray Bradbury's The Veldt, which is highly recommended by the author. This story was read and performed for you by Silas Reynolds. Art and images by Gabriel Poland. Theme and music credit to the song Anxiety, written and performed by On Deaf Ears, otherwise known as the band Chloe. All rights reserved.